Our team at Atlantic Construction Podcast is excited to announce our newest partner, Luminous Labs. Luminous Labs is the leading provider of architectural visualizations for developers, homeowners, architects, and more. Luminous Labs has a team of experienced designers and visualizers using cutting-edge technology to bring your 3D renderings to life. Using these architectural visualizations will give you a sense of scale, space, and design, allowing you to make informed decisions about your projects before construction even begins. These high-end architectural visualizations are a perfect tool for presentations, marketing materials, and design reviews, allowing you to communicate your vision to stakeholders, clients, and more. We'd like to thank our co-branded partner, Procore Technology. Procore Technologies is the global leader in construction management software. We look forward to having many guests from across the country from all different capacities under the Procore partnership umbrella. We'd like to thank our formal partner, Payzant Building Products. Payzant has a 60,000 square foot facilitation center currently underway, as well as acquired a new location in Windsor. Lots of change and big news with Payzant, and we look forward to having them back on the podcast in the near future. Welcome back to the Atlantic Construction Podcast. We're very excited to have our guest today, the interior designers of Nova Scotia, an association. We're joined by three members today. So across the table from me is Emma Woodhall, president. We have Mide Metwali, who's director at large, social media and awards committee, and to my left is Lori Arnold. So thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Again, all board members, and we'll be talking a lot about interior design throughout the episode and what it means to be an interior designer and just common misconceptions. And it's a lot to dive into. It's a huge topic and such a big part of so many different commercial projects, whether it's restaurants, office fit ups, the list goes on and on. So pretty excited to dive in with you ladies today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
We like to start with a little bit of context and background. So maybe if you could share individually, just short, kind of the Coles Notes version of just a little bit of your journey and just your education and how you kind of got into the interior design world. Could we start with you, Emma? Just tell us a little bit about where you did your education and just a few of the steps into where it brought you today.
Sure. I am an American, actually, from Kansas City area. But I went to school, or college as we would say in the States, but I went to university at Kansas State University.
Wow.
For interior architecture I graduated in 2003. That was actually the last year. It was a bachelor program. The following year,
Really?
For the same amount of education, it became a master's.
What's that line from the movie? You're not in Kansas anymore. What is that movie?
The Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. How could I not remember that?
So yeah, we get that a lot. But I was there until about 2010. I moved to Nova Scotia by chance. The 2008 recession kind of took some breath out of the industry in Kansas City, and I thought it was a good time to seek something different. And sure. I wound up here on a whim. I actually
Why Nova Scotia?
I applied to a job in a magazine. Just thinking like it might be fun to visit someplace I've never been, and I've been here ever since. And IDNS really was integral in welcoming me into the industry here, and making sure that I knew what I needed and what I wanted to do. They made me a board member pretty quickly after that. So since then, I think I've been the treasurer a couple times, the secretary, the CE director. I think that's about it. Oh, vice president, and now I'm president. So I'll be happy to give Lori my presidency following me. So
awesome.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Mia?
So
you're from Toronto, correct?
I'm from Toronto originally. Yes. Finished high school and went into the interior design program at Sheridan College in Oakville, Ontario. I don't think I understood back then what I was getting into. It definitely was so much more than what I'd expected.
In a good way.
In a good way. I mean, yeah, I think I was learning what is interior design in going towards the program. So, so started school in 2004, graduated in 2007, and I got lucky at the time. My mother was a teacher, and one of her students' mothers was an interior designer at a very well-known firm back then. And so I did my internship with them for 3 weeks, which would wrap up my my interior design program at Sheridan.
Nice.
And then they decided to keep me on board. So that was officially my start. And they, at the time, were a corporate office focused firm. And so that's where I started in workplace. And I kind of never changed my direction. I was really passionate about workplace design from the beginning. Similar to Emma, our industry was affected by the recession in 2009 as well. So that was an interesting time. But anyways, fast forward, spent many years in the industry, met a lot of amazing people, worked on some pretty incredible projects. And we made the move out to Nova Scotia in April 2021. And we've been here since. We said we would give it a year and evaluate. Yeah. And then...
but pretty recent.
Yeah. And love the city.
That's great.
Love it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. What about yourself, Lori? Because you were telling us earlier you got 44 years experience. Almost as an interior designer.
Yeah.
So a true veteran.
Well, when you love what you do,
yeah,
it's hard to give it up. So at some point, someday I'll retire. Not there yet. I grew up in London, Ontario. I remember in grade 13 looking through the catalog of different programs at different universities across Canada. And I ran across the program at University of Manitoba. So this was 1975, 1974. And at that time, it was the only 4-year BA program of interior design in Canada. And I thought, well, there's some advantage to that, to take something that's at one institution. And I wanted to leave London and go somewhere and have an adventure and whatnot. So I thought, well, I'll do it. So I spent my 4 years in Winnipeg. And then my first career job was in St. John, New Brunswick. And I worked for an architectural firm. And at the time in 1979, this architectural firm, they're gone now, but they were over 100 years old. It was fascinating. Yeah. They had these the drawing file drawers.
Right.
And they had
no file sharing in those days. Nothing digital.
No. And they had original hand drafted drawings from
the 20s.
Yeah, 1920.
I've seen some of those in old church basements.
And I was just fascinated by them because just the detail of the elevations and it was quite amazing.
In 75, do you remember, do you have to take hand drafting, with even
at
with
school,
spelling and letters and all that kind of stuff?
Even in 2003.
Interesting.
You still
I guess even then you did.
Yeah. So the thing that's fascinating about hand drafting and hand sketching, it's
so time consuming.
Well, it's like knife skills. Your brain and your fingers are connected.
Yeah.
You can use an electric
it's
knife.
Good therapy, I think.
Yeah. Or a chopper or something. But when you're using your brain and your hands at the same time, I think
something special about that.
Yes.
It's like writing out your thoughts almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, at the time, there were very few interior designers in New Brunswick. So not enough at the time New Brunswick has an association. I don't know when the inception was, but at the time there was very few of us in New Brunswick.
Were you one of several interior designers at this architecture firm?
There was 2 of us.
Okay.
Yeah. So Interior Designers of Nova Scotia invited us to join their association.
Makes sense. Consolidate the provinces.
Yeah. So I think it was now we have our association has non-resident registered members, but at that time it wasn't quite that formal. It was just an invitation to join another association. So.
Wow.
That's my journey.
Yeah, a little piece of it.
Yes, yes,
There's
yes.
much more to the
That's
story.
5 years of it, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes, the
No,
first
no.
5.
No, thank you. It's important to give context to our listeners and just the educational backgrounds and just it's good for perspective, and everybody has a different way into the industry and into their profession, and so thank you for sharing that. And maybe before we dive into some layered topics on interior design, kind of hit a milestone with IDNS, Interior Designers of Nova Scotia, recently with the recent awards ceremony, not awards ceremony, but awards gala. You were giving out many different awards. You had attendance of over 200 professionals across the province. The categories for the awards were anything from interior design of restaurant spaces, office workplaces, and the list goes on. Can you tell us just a little bit about how it went for the first one, and what it meant to the association and what it means to the profession in the province?
Yeah, it was in fact a huge milestone for us. We spent the better part of 8 months planning for it. We had a committee dedicated to it, and it wasn't just planning the physical gala itself. It was planning the whole process of project submissions. What were things going to be? What were the criterias? How were they going to be graded? Who were the judges? So the first 3 months of the committee's focus was on building the program. Okay, what does that package look like? Getting all the details pulled together, and that was officially released to all of our associations across the Atlantic coast. So it does include it beyond Nova Scotia. It was Nova Scotia, PEI, Newfoundland, and New Brunswick. So all 4 provinces had the ability to submit projects that they felt were maybe worth putting forward for an award in different categories. Once that component was, sorted and done, we jumped into the planning of the gala, and we had an amazing support system along the way. And it was amazing. I mean, I think the goal for the AIDAs and I think what we'd aimed for a long time was celebrating great design from coast to coast. And these are galas that take place in other provinces as well, but it was the first time here. And it was really just about celebrating good design and bringing our community of people together. And it's beyond just interior designers. It's the landlords we work with. It's the brokers.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So a lot of the clients.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's everyone.
right.
So
this could be restaurant owners. They could be law firms. They could anyone in any kind of interior space that offers a product or service.
A lot of designers brought their clients, right? Like if they had winning projects, it's like let's bring the clients and celebrate the project. And
contractors too.
Exactly. So it's amazing because when you look at our industry, it touches on so many different areas, and so this is a place to bring them all, but to also at the same time ensure that the focus is on interior design and the celebration of good design. So we had three awards levels. We had an award of merit, an award of excellence, and then project of the year. And project of the year was selected based on the highest scoring project. There was very detailed criteria that were developed around how these projects would get graded. All of the projects submitted were completely confidential, no names, no firms. You didn't know any history of it other than the project itself. And the categories, as you mentioned, touch on everything: hospitality, restaurant, workplace, residential. So
healthcare.
Education.
So for our first year, I think we did pretty amazing. Like
That's awesome.
we handed out 13 awards, and the feedback was really great. And Emma did an opening speech that night as the president.
All I had to do was thank everybody who did all the hard work.
But I think it's just the beginning of something really amazing, and we're so excited to continue growing this. And I think that now that people have had exposure to what this event is and what's celebrated, we expect that it's only going to grow.
Yeah, Laura, you must have some thoughts on it as well, with just your role with IDNS and your long career in the industry. To see that awards gala come to life, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, and there have been award ceremonies in other
You better have won an award. We don't have to talk about it, but yeah, I'm going to check into that.
in other parts of Canada, for instance, Toronto, Arito in Toronto and out
Right.
west.
This is a common.
So it's really
Yeah.
a milestone here, and it's
Yeah.
wonderful because we could in the past we could have been part of award ceremonies. Interior Designers of Canada has a vote awards, and we could have entered vote awards. But it's nice to bring it home and have something in Atlantic Canada to celebrate.
Yeah.
For sure. Any thoughts, Emma, for yourself on the event? And
I'm just excited. The greatest part is that it is not just Nova Scotia, but we're bringing other associate, like New Brunswick just got their Practice Act put together a little more recently than IDNS has. So they're
so would
kind
you
of-
have worked together with them on that Practice Act and shared
we definitely
protocols?
Shared some experience
Yeah,
with them. Yes.
they looked at our act as a bit of a model legislation along with others, and we definitely helped them where they wanted it. But to be able to help them on their journey and be more of a community out here for, like we say, like past Toronto, there's no real
Yeah, I always use the analogy like, we all have to stick together in the eastern provinces and the East Coast and
Yeah.
the Maritimes because we are just one province to everyone west of Toronto or Quebec even.
It kind of gives you a bigger pool of projects as well. I feel like if we just did Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, tried to do just New Brunswick, or even PEI, who is even smaller, there might be only 2 submissions for the whole year. so it helps make that pool a little more large, so that when you do win an award, you don't feel like it's just because you were the only one that submitted an award. You know what I mean? So I think it worked out really well, and the model is such that we can pass it between the provinces if we want to. So
Right.
looking at maybe New
Circle of
Brunswick hosting a
provinces.
year, we're still looking into that. But there's a lot to have learned this year, I would say. But I think we're going to get bigger and better every year.
Amazing.
It's going to be exciting.
Amazing. And yeah, I'm excited. We had lots of, pre-podcast discussions about interior design and just the extent of being an interior designer, lead consultant on, so many of these projects in ICI construction and fit ups and anything inside the building envelope. And I'm learning a lot personally, and I'm thinking of people tuning in, whether they're contractors of interiors companies or millwork, different trades that are tackling some of these large interior spaces, whether it be, major retail spaces in some of the malls, shopping centers throughout Nova Scotia, or law firms moving into just behind us here at the Queen's Mark, some different, just all kinds of examples. So we're going to talk a lot about, just to start, what is an interior designer? And I think, Mireille, you wanted to maybe give us
I feel like we can all talk about that.
well, I think
But yes, I'll get the conversation started.
Yeah,
but
you
I
wanna
think
get
we,
us started
yeah,
on
we
that.
can all probably add to it. So, as we kind of discussed at the beginning, the education is the first part of becoming an interior designer. So, and we are going to get into a little bit more detail through this conversation as to, okay, no 2 interior design programs are built the same. And so which ones are the ones that we need to be taking if we want to pursue the profession. So 4-year degree programs, and then you have the ability to go for a master's.
There is a third-party association called CIDA, who basically goes around. It's a North American association, but they certify schools, educators. And so our act calls out CIDA accredited degrees for being a member of IDNS, just because it's the main regulator in North America for overseeing education. So it didn't used to always be 4 years. I don't know that it is necessarily just 4 years, but it does have to be a CIDA accredited degree. And if it's not, there are third-party reviews that can be done to kind of assess if it's something similar. But that is the first thing, is to get your education. And then once once you do that, then there's some internship hours that
Right.
need to happen in a specific. It's good to see. It used to just be like so many years of internship, but now there are specific amounts of hours of
Right.
internship in certain areas, like contract administration, design, governance and regulation, things like that.
Not unlike an engineer's journey before they're able to stamp drawings, having enough
Exactly.
hours and years under their belt to do so. I was thinking, like, maybe a silly question some people might be thinking who are outside of the profession is, okay, if it's a 4-year degree to have a degree in interior design, can you also take a route of, taking, 4 years of architecture school and then mastering or majoring in interior design? And then if you do major in interior design, or you do take 4 years, do you have to pick, am I a workplace interior designer? Am I a healthcare interior designer? Do you specialize, or you have
No.
Okay.
You that
It's
Options
interior
after
spaces
that option
as a
becomes,
whole.
exactly.
Right.
It's not part
It's-
of the education.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
it doesn't get that, but from a 30,000-foot view, if you're comparing it, interior designer to let's say an architect, which can mean many things, right? You mentioned contract administration, tendering, processing change orders. Maybe an architect in Europe is designing buildings all the time that are extravagant, and but being an architect in the East Coast of Canada is a lot of paperwork and maybe no design in some regards. But just for context, like, you're going to specialize in something, right? Nobody can be an expert in everything. So interior design is everything inside the building envelope on the architectural side. Does that kind of sum up safely what
you would study interior
Part
design?
9, section 9 of the
of
master
the building
spec,
spec?
is, well, section 6 and section 9, I think we do a lot of work in. We go into other sections.
Right, because those are the architectural components in Division 9.
If you know the divisions of master spec, that kind of clears stuff up. I don't know if the general public would know that, but
Yeah.
Millwork finishes, interior finishes, and then you get into architectural specialties and furniture and furnishings in Division 12, things like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, Division 1, Division 3, where you need, but we're heavy-handed in 6 and 9.
Yeah, and it's true in a way. Like, once a building is closed in, or a lot of times, like you mentioned, like tenant, leasehold, GCs were at your gala, right? Clients of yours. Well, once a lot of commercial buildings are put up, like, then they're divided by the landlord into various bays and spaces for different retail or healthcare or tenants. And then once that's a different process than having the shell there with all the building envelope components, right? That takes on that's a whole new form of construction, you might say.
It does. And I'd almost say that coming out of school, you're still very much in the education lane. Like, the area of practice that you choose, whether it's workplace or, like, it's completely different.
Yeah.
A completely different base of knowledge. So, what you're doing in workplace will not apply to a restaurant, will not apply to a hotel. So you kind of...
Well, that's why
And
firms
variety is the
specialize
spice
as
of life,
well,
right?
Yeah.
That's part of what
Well,
you enjoy and are passionate about.
Yeah,
being
well,
an
and I
interior
think that's
designer.
where the experience comes in. Like, as young designers, I always encourage young designers that I'm mentoring. Okay, you got to try a few things before you decide what focus you want to take, what sector of design, because you like I said, I got into workplace, and I loved it. I really loved it, and so that was me. But it's not always the case. So some people might say, oh, I'm going to go and try out hospitality for a while. It's important to do it early in your career when you're still like learning, absorbing, and still very much like in that part of your career. And then and then you eventually evolve.
Right. Plus, too, if your firm or you personally have only worked on, say, interior spaces for the food and entertainment industry or something, and then all of a sudden Deloitte's putting an office in the 15th floor of Purdy's Wharf, you might you might not get the RFP because you don't have the history, but it might not be something you want to just step into and
Exactly.
Blind.
Exactly.
But sometimes there's opportunities where you're partnered with other firms.
Yes.
And so there's a
There's a lead
sharing of...
Like, there's a lead architect and you're with combined consultant with them?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Over the years, every once in a while you get a project and the designer's in Toronto and they have a certain expertise,
That happens
but
quite often.
they need feet on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's kind of shared knowledge, and then you start to develop some
So in those
Mhm.
cases, would those be architecture firms or interior design firms
Interior
outsourcing?
design.
Generally
Feet on the
interior
ground.
design.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because a lot of interior designers do work at architecture firms, right? Would every major architecture firm have that division?
Not all.
Not all.
No, and those, if there isn't a design department, it's typically like an interiors focused department within an architectural firm. So yes, they're going to support architects on their projects, but they may also have projects that are
Right.
interior only. The architects won't even be involved. So it's bringing
Right.
two professions together, really.
Right, and that clarifies the difference a little bit too. The statement that you just made between an architect and an interior designer, which a
Yeah.
lot of people's mind would go to if they're in the industry, or they're not familiar with making that distinction. I mean, retail contractors would know, right? They're working closely with you as a lead consultant for the client, and you're coming to them with the floor plans and the interior elevations and the whole design of the job, and then they're taking it to pre-construction and tender and assisting with
Exactly.
tendering. But you're
Exactly.
assisting with tendering too,
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
and contract documents, and
Yeah.
then you're all the way through with the client as a kind of facilitator between the client and then the general contractor or construction manager, whoever's managing the construction side.
Exactly. Like, I think that often there's a lot of emphasis placed on the part where we're designing. And yes, that is part of what we do. But there is so much that comes before that. And I feel like that's what needs to be communicated more, is like we have
3 years
several
of planning.
Yeah,
we have
picking
several
the colors is the
phases.
easy part, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's like 5% of what we do. And like, and that could be stressful depending on what you love doing and part of the process. But, there is like, you watch those design shows and I'm often like, oh, I'm sure they're doing it in the background, but you're just kind of, they're diving right into like, we're going to do this renovation and here's this space, right?
And
like,
it's all
what
done
about-
in 2 days.
It's all done in 2 days. So, people
Well, it
tend
takes
to think
like 6 months. They just show it in 2 days on the
Exactly.
screen.
They
right?
speed
Yeah,
up.
they speed up the video. They can do that.
Oh my god! So in a way, you kind of lose a little bit of like, okay, there's like a part where you need to get to know the client. What's their personality? What's their culture? What are they looking to achieve? All these things, before you even put pen to paper. And then it's programming. It's sorting out, what types of spaces they need, what's dedicated, what's shared, all sorts of amenities. Like, we're going through a pretty detailed process.
Not to mention like building products and
Yeah.
specs and
There's some
Yeah.
research
Oh yeah.
involved for sure.
Yeah.
the technical side is daunting in
Oh
itself.
yeah.
Yeah.
The drawings. Yeah. Yeah. There's
And
planning
then
and then there's design.
The whole contract administration and project management, once it goes into construction, could make or break a project.
Yes.
So that's almost the most important part at the end as well.
Elaborate on that a little bit, because I think that's an important.
But just making sure that you, as prime consultant, when you are a prime consultant, have the knowledge to
And resources.
understand the details that were drawn, and when the GC has a question, that it's Halifax, right? We have old buildings, something's going to come up. And so having
Mice.
the resource to make those decisions and change directions where you need to do so. Even value engineering comes up quite a bit these days, or drywall isn't going to be here for 2 weeks. What do we do? And really, in the process of specifying materials and finishes as well, we have to be cognizant of what's this going to do to my schedule. I love this 9-foot door, but is it going to come in 6 weeks, or is it going to come in 24 weeks? You know what I mean? So, I mean, we could design you the world, but we also have to kind of look at what's realistic within the project parameters as well.
Yeah, and those, as on the project management side, it's a very key milestone to have doors open when the client needs them to be, whether it's seasonal for services and products that they're selling, or a few weeks on the schedule is a big deal.
And that's really where going back to education as just the start of becoming an interior designer, where internship really comes into play. A lot of those things are the school of hard knocks, learning on the job. You don't really get that in school so much.
True.
And then once you get all of that education and on the job education, then we do also have an exam that you have to pass in order to become fully registered as an interior designer.
So all the experience is meant to be, or is required to be, with a registered interior designer.
Mm-hmm.
So no one's getting out of school and practicing interior
With somebody
design.
who isn't registered with IDNS as a
Mm-hmm.
right. So that's part of the act, right? That's
Yep.
part of the And the exam is something that's designated and designed by IDNS and the board members as well.
It is CIDQ. They used to be in CIDQ. Now they're
Kind of under a
CIDQ.
national.
It is
It's
a
North American.
U.S. North American organization, and they write the exam. So most of the U.S. and Canada, there's a few exceptions amongst provinces, but except CETA, sorry, not CETA, in CIDQ as the exam. There's some French language issues that come up across a few provinces that I think on a national level, IDC and some other organizations are trying to work out. But for the most part, that is the most well-known exam.
Mm-hmm. So you typically write that. You spend about 3,250 hours. That's the amount of hours that you need to have under your belt. And as Emma was saying, different
It's
different
3
parts.
sections, yeah.
Exactly. And then you study to write the exams in 3 sections. If you pass successfully, then you are officially considered an interior designer.
We'd like to welcome our newest partner here at AC Media, the Freeman Group. Freeman Group Financial works closely with business owners, professionals, and retirees as their primary custodial wealth manager. The Freeman Group is targeting contractors and people in the construction industry as they move forward. The Freeman Group is a great choice for all your financial wealth management with a local touch. We look forward to having the Freeman Group on our podcast several times throughout the next 12 months with specific financial educational episodes. Sublier Trinity is Atlantic Canada's newest drywall and interiors contractor. Sublier Trinity is a joint effort between Trinity Energy Group, local Division 7 experts for over 17 years in Atlantic Canada, and Sublier Constructors, a highly reputable commercial interiors company based in Ottawa since 1986. Sublier Trinity has been performing work on commercial projects throughout Atlantic Canada this year, while planning for more growth in the years to come. We'd like to thank our partner, Pivot Accounting. If you're a contractor or small to medium-sized business owner in the construction industry and are looking to outsource your payroll, accounting services, and financial needs, Pivot Accounting is a great option.
But if not, you can't actually use interior designer until you've passed the CIDQ
And have all your experience.
and have all your experience. Exactly.
So what about the difference between interior decorators and interior designers? Let me break that down.
They do have their own association as well. So
Okay.
it's just a different professional practice than ours. I think I can't really speak for them. I can only speak
What's
for us.
included with
but,
them? Is that more like furniture and other things that are outside of the actual components of the space?
we're the ones that will stamp and permit drawings. So anything in Part 3 of the building code, anything above and beyond a Part 9 building or a small dwelling would be requiring of a stamp for permit, would need to be under an architect or an interior designer.
That's interesting. So I feel like a lot of people take a lot of pride in their skills in interior design when it comes to their own property or their own homes and things like that. And certainly it's a passion or hobby for those people, but just to see the extensive specialty of this profession especially within the commercial construction industry, it's so much more going on maybe than someone might think, just who's outside of the profession.
Yeah.
Right.
There is a lot of just like there's crossover between what architects and interior designers do. There's a bit of crossover between what we do and what they do.
And I think that would be the biggest misconception within the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the difference or why? Yeah.
Yep. It's just getting to know your project and what your project needs and making sure you have the right consultants on the team to do the project, basically.
Right. Because, like for interior projects, let's say major interior projects, like would there be architects bidding on the same RFP as an interior design firm? No.
There
Yes.
could be.
It's
There could
possible.
be,
Yeah.
right? If that's something that they were,
pursuing for business reasons or because it was a client they worked with before on other projects, and this happened to be just a large interior space. So you do bid against architects.
Yes.
So you are like
Sometimes.
On interior
on
projects.
interior projects,
it
right?
can
So it could be an
happen.
architect or an interior designer involved, playing the same
can.
role really. Once
Yeah.
it's past once the RFP is out, and then you are the lead consultant, you're basically functioning as the same entity in regards to as far as the client's concerned, right?
It depends what you want out of your project, and I think it's important to recognize the difference in education.
But a
what
lot
are
of
you
clients might not
focusing on?
know that either,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
We are trained and educated to think from an interiors perspective, the functionalities, how spaces are used, what's needed. So a lot of our education is focused on
Bringing in the
interiors.
human element as well, and
Exactly.
making sure
And how the
humans are
human
comfortable in the space.
Human-centric.
right
Yeah.
human-centric, and how
That's
humans
it.
will interact with the space. So when you say
Yeah.
that, do you mean in terms of like, interior designers going to have more database and layered knowledge when it comes to different lighting systems, or a catalog of different assemblies or ceiling assemblies that can be used on similar type of spaces that save room and space for a 9-foot door, or for a wall assembly that's thinner, so we can make this room a little bit larger and keep the throat size of the door this and change the middle. So it's just more of you're just more specialized and central to the interiors, whereas you're not incorporating all the other elements like that, maybe like that an architecture firm would outside of interiors.
Yeah, it's
right?
tough. Like, you never want to compare. It's like everyone is.
And that's
is
not what we're here to
practicing-
do.
That's what
right?
I was
Exactly.
just
It's just-
thinking.
Like,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no comparison. I think we all have our specialties, and as an architect, if you're comfortable doing interiors, then you're comfortable doing interiors, and you're
Yeah.
ultimately your work and your portfolio will speak to that. And what we can say confidently is that as designers, yes, we are specialized. We spend time studying and learning the interiors. It's not to say that an architect can't do that. So I think it's
No,
just
for
two
sure.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's no different in the fact that
Mhm.
an architecture firm might be comfortable with doing lots of interior spaces, and they have lots of interior designers on staff. But when it comes to the structural components of the interior space, like a mezzanine or anything like that, both an interior designer and architect are going to have to outsource or combine, an engineering firm and get them involved to handle that part, right? So it's not like you're competing with them either, right? It's just
Yeah.
it's all part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
What about some of the info on members of the interior designers of Nova Scotia, membership tiers, what it means to be a member? You've already mentioned, the exam, and each individual has to do that and all firms that are carrying out interior design work as a profession are obviously under the Act. But what are some other benefits for the members?
Well, being able to legally practice in the province is the
Yes.
biggest
Yes.
one. But I don't know. Lori might be able to speak more to this as well. But
Is there mixers? Is there educational
we
events,
do
things
try
like that?
that is another component of keeping up your membership, actually carrying liability insurance and keeping up on CEUs. We have to have 10 a year, and some
Continuing
being
education.
health, safety, and welfare. They are much easier to gain online these days, but we do try to, when we do have general membership meetings, to bring that resource to our members as well. But
You're protecting the clients by doing all this too, right? That's part of the whole. Yeah.
And our vendors, the local vending community, finishes, vendors, and things like that love to show us their products, and in association they'll give us some education credits as we go. But I've found in the past few years, even our membership has grown. We have a dedicated registrar who is in charge of reviewing all these memberships applications and vetting them, and even we have to send her our credits every year to make sure that we're still compliant and things like that. But since COVID, Mire is a good example. We've had a lot of people coming from other provinces to our province, so I've seen our membership grow within the last couple of years, and even our non-resident registered members membership has grown as well. So there's there's definitely other interior designers in Canada working in the province these days. But I think we've, at least for the 10, 15 years that I've been in Nova Scotia, we've hovered around 40 to 50 members. And that hasn't really changed too much in the past few years.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, different governing bodies and Division 6 and 9 of the spec, and you're talking earlier about ALMAC when it comes to millwork, and I'm thinking of like the building code and different things you're subject to as an interior designer, maybe more so than an architect or than different parts of the building. Like, are there other things other than ALMAC or certain parts of the building code that you're constantly, not just educating yourself on, but referring to? Like, are there some other examples you can give?
3.8 barrier free.
3.8 or
Yes.
CSA B651 is the alternate to 3.8. But the accessibility
that's
requirements
even
are
bigger
a
thing
big
now,
one.
right?
And I think Nova Scotia is kind of getting there on accessibility, but not quite there yet. So there's even an association called Rick-Hansen that's across the country that is almost like lead for accessibility. So there's all kinds of bigger, or I guess better than spec things you could do
When it comes
for
to
for sustainability. You could do green
Lead
well,
Yeah.
Green Globes, and then there's Rick Hansen for accessibility.
okay.
If I can
Well, it's
think of any
almost a little
others.
bit more like human centric.
Yeah.
Well, I know accessibility's come up. We've had other architects on the podcast throughout Atlantic Canada and Central Canada when talking about like a lot of the dollars that are spent on low-income housing, or maybe different seniors' homes and stuff like that, where the specs were kind of a lot of were kind of bare minimum and should have been better living quality, better designed for higher living quality for these individuals who are moving into these homes. And whether it's wheelchair ramps or washroom design specs and all kinds of different things, right? It seems to be a lot. Is there progress being made there? Is it more stringent now with a lot of interior spaces too?
Well, that was a really good way to put it. I mean, I think in that specific example, I think if you give people the pride in their space, they'll act differently, they'll treat it differently, and they'll live in it differently, right? And so I think a lot needs to be done there. And in what are we investing? What are we putting into, for example, low-income housing? Are we making it a place where people feel proud and feel good about being there, or is it being forgotten, right? So
And that's something we're working with. A consultant in general can bring to the table. Here's what your minimum building code, and there are definitely landlords that will only want to pay for what the minimum is. But if you can convince them that it is a worthwhile thing to do greater than the minimum code, then it's a good thing for everyone.
But there's private sector clients who are on board with some of these programs. They don't want to just do the building code. They want to do Rick Hansen, and they want it to be
right.
They
And
make the
wanna have
choice to
quality over the
incorporate it
cost.
into their projects.
Right.
Yes, yeah, they make that commitment.
Which is an
And some
upsell
don't.
for them as well.
Some
right?
don't, because it's
Right.
Rick Hansen it's not mandatory for any reason.
Right.
It's just a good thing to do.
Yes. Is there any examples you can give of like trends right now or recent years, or where things are headed when it comes to, like, I think of the topic of lighting. We've had different distributors and suppliers that are scheduled to be on the podcast of all kinds of different lighting. It's kind of its own arena, like whether it's LED or different types, or you have a lot of office spaces or interior spaces that are fully enclosed by a curtain wall and there's lots of natural light. Or what are some of the things that you think about with different kinds of spaces, just for some examples, like some practical examples for our listeners? Is that too broad a question, or?
I mean, I think we could talk about like some planning practices for sure, and like how those have evolved even since the pandemic, how things have changed. I mean, everyone heard the topic of like what's going to happen to the office and what is it supposed to be and how are we going to bring people back. And so, you know, some of the things that I think are important to focus on is what will bring people back, what will be worth that commute if they're coming in. A lot of people now know, like, hey, I can work from home, I can get my focus time, I can be alone. Right. So what did we miss during the pandemic? It was people. So it's designing for social connection. It's designing for a variety of spaces that you can't necessarily get when you're working from home. Okay, you can get your heads down, work at home, but what about spaces where you can better come together as a team, or you can come in because you want a social day and you want to see people. So I think there's greater emphasis now on choice. Like if you're going to try and bring someone in to say, you've got to sit at this workstation all day, that's not going to bring someone back. No. But if you can say, like, hey, you're going to come in, and depending on what your day looks like, you have an 8-hour day, you may be doing 3 different types of tasks that require different types of spaces and focus. I think variety and choice is a huge attraction for how we bring people back, because people need to feel that, right?
Right. So can you give examples of that? Like, is it just more of like the layout of the office space, and then maybe, you know, there's no partition here, or it's glass enclosed with a boardroom table or stand-up desks here, and how people are kind of working at their station, but they're working together? Like, is that...
I think, like, in the past, you know, let's say even 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I started in the design industry, it was all about cubicles and private offices, and then very formal meeting rooms.
And the offices were all on the exterior windows.
They were all on the exterior, no access to natural light unless you had an office. The best views were reserved for the people that were in offices. You fast forward to today, I mean, if you're designing a progressive space, you are designing a space that the majority of the build out is on the interior of a floor plate. Therefore, everyone has equal access to views and to natural light. Mm-hmm. When I say variety of spaces, it can be spaces that are meant for single one person, a phone room where you can take your laptop in, you can have that virtual call, you're alone. It can be a meeting room for 4. The furniture, the ancillary furniture is a huge component too. Not every meeting room needs to have a table and 4 chairs to be a meeting room. It's what are you trying to encourage in that room? Is it going to be a lounge chair and a low top table and some like different spaces, different layouts will have you thinking differently and working differently. So I think it's very much driven by what do you want to happen in those spaces.
There's a whole change management component with that as well, getting the decision makers out of their comfort zone. This is the office that we've had for the past 20 years. We're going to change to this type of office. What do we keep and what do we...
It's really a business decision. It's not furniture driven. There's furniture out there that
will do anything.
Speaks to it. That's right.
And but furniture is like, that's the thing. I mean, when I think of furniture, I think of, you know, companies like Office Interiors and different, you know, where it's such a big part of and huge cost to a lot of these workplaces that you'll see, you know, in the city. But that's just one component of an interior designer's job as lead consultant when you're designing the whole space, right?
Yeah.
And
the furniture is going to support part of the solution.
It's
is the
way
you look at it.
Well,
solution.
What I was thinking of earlier was when you were talking about. I was thinking of mental health when you were talking about designing that in a certain way. And, you know, in the past, I've worked in offices that have really good window view downtown Halifax. And like, I could think clearer. I don't know if people listening can relate, but like, it was a nice day. I was there right next to the window, kind of, I was able to just take a second, like roll back in my chair, look out the window and think, you know, process whatever, or then being stuck and looking at a blank, wall or no, it did make a big difference for me, like a noticeable difference. And is that something you guys think about when you're designing, like thinking about people's mental health and just their well-being in that way?
Absolutely.
Constantly
natural light. If you don't have, I think that's the biggest component on any interior.
Vitamin D.
If you don't have good lighting, you've done all for naught. You know,
when referring to natural lighting
natural
and
natural lighting
And artificial.
artificial lighting.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a terrible quality of light, if there's different Kelvin temperatures.
Even it can give you headaches, your eyes. It's-
Mhm.
yeah.
I
So
often
these things are a big deal, and not something that, you know, if you're not in the arena of architecture and interior design specifically, and you're involved in these buildings, maybe you don't think about those things as much, or your trade is done long before. And I'm thinking of in context of who's listening to our media channels, whether they're a contractor in concrete or, well, maybe it's flooring or painting, and you're there on the interior space, but you're not thinking about the reasons why things are the way they are, right? With the lighting and with the situation of the layout and all that kind of stuff, and the thought that goes in and how people are going to interact. And it's actually, you're thinking about all kinds of things like their mental health and their eyes and avoiding headaches and all that kind of stuff. You don't always think about that. You do in your profession, but other people involved don't
It's true.
as much.
It's true. It's almost like at the end of the day, you're like, it's just how you feel. I don't know how else to describe it. And for every person who ever goes into an interior space, it's just about how you feel once you sit in that space. Is it a good feeling? Is it you know, a lot of it is also designing for an experience.
Right.
You know, a social experience may be very different than an experience that requires focus and quiet. So it's having the understanding and learning enough about the clients that we're working with to say, you know, what do you guys need to support your day-to-day? You know, from the moment you step into that office to the moment you leave, what does your day look like? And also acknowledging that different departments and different groups of people will have different needs. Just because one needs this, it doesn't mean the other. And so it's learning about that entire circle and being very inclusive about who we speak to. We don't want to just speak to the leaders. Their experience is very different than the end users and their employees who are there doing the work on a day-to-day. So it's important to speak to everyone.
And that's just workplace design.
That's just workplace.
You got to think about healthcare design and patient mentalities
Exactly.
and education design.
And nurses and how they
and
interact with
how
space,
children are
doctors
being educated in a school every day. And even to a retail experience, how are you finding your product on a shelf, or how are you enjoying your stay in a hotel? You know what I mean? It's
so many different professions that you're impacting. And you think like most, say, maybe a safe statement, like most lawyers are left-brained, and, you know, as far as like the temperament that might make up like such a driven career choice and working 80 hours a week. But then if they're working in a certain environment that was designed to its optimum capacity so that they could be the healthiest and think the clearest and they're more efficient, and instead of walking through a place that was just really poorly designed, and they're, you know, 30% more productive, they're healthier, but they're not necessarily thinking of the interior designer, right? But if you did your job, even though they're not thinking of you, like you've impacted those people and how they're interacting with the space. And it's the old saying, like, you know, everyone's so busy, like they're not thinking of you, right? But you have made an impact, right, on that business and those people.
sometimes you don't even notice it unless you're somewhere where it wasn't thought about.
Yes.
and you can, I always think I'm probably
so
aging
true.
myself, but the movie Being John Malkovich, where they have office floors where he can barely put his head up against the ceiling, and there's awful fluorescent lighting that's flickering the whole time. That's when people are going to really notice that this isn't what we want.
Yeah,
When
it's
it
like that
is-
tree fort I built in my parents' backyard
Yes.
when I
That
was
can only
9.
fit you at 9.
Yeah, it wasn't designed very well. Anyway, sorry.
But sometimes I think people not noticing how comfortable they are is the biggest compliment.
So true.
When there's a lot
You've
of
done your
pain.
job so well that no one noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
It's
feel
just
good.
comfortable, and it's a good place to be.
I was thinking of, you know, your relationship with as lead consultant for these interior spaces, and be it under any classification, like you mentioned, healthcare, education, so many different ones, workplace. Is it when you're working with you obviously build relationships with construction firms as CM or GC, and you're like an architect would on a public full build or something. But do you also have in your kind of network, like I'm thinking from a contractor standpoint, if I was a custom millwork shop, I'd want to be in touch with interior designers and, you know, what's trending, and talking about our past projects and our services, and even interiors companies when it comes to drywall and suspended ceilings and those kind of things. Are you in contact with subcontractors too a lot, or asking them questions, or do they communicate with you at all? A lot of times on a project they might not. It might not be formal of them to. They're under the GC, right? And you're between the GC and the client, so there's a certain structure in place. But is there any kind of relationship that interior design firms would have with some subcontractors?
Depending
and
on the
things?
project, and sometimes the general contractors are quite happy to have the millwork contractor to contact you directly, not during the tendering process or anything like that,
right.
but certainly afterwards for you to work out the details with them. It's sharing information. But sometimes general contractors understand that if they're translating those questions,
they're translating them to you regardless, right?
right. That
Right.
sometimes it's better if there's direct.
Right, and that's
contact.
happening a lot of times in the tender process as an RFI formally, and then an altercation is made on the plans and addendum to the bid and whatnot. But after that too, even throughout a project, if it's a really intense millwork or interior space, then there's all kinds of
you respect their craft at that stage.
Yeah.
Like I love, like for me, I'm like, please tell me, like once we get to site and things are starting to get built, if you know, they may come to you, and of course the GC is always going to be aware and they're going to be present, but it's so good to hear from the people who are building, right? They might say, okay, Mireille, you showed something this way, but you know what, if you do it this way, it might actually be whatever it is better. It might turn it, you know, you might get a better result.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important, like the way people look to us for our expertise and our knowledge, that like once things are in construction, say we run into a site condition or there's something, you know, that we're having those conversations and that
And
collaboration
resolving
doesn't
the
stop.
problem together.
It's
Yeah.
great. And yeah, exactly.
And I'm thinking about like specific things where, like, you know, a lot of finishes are really specific to different projects. Like a lot of times they're owner supplied, right? Like let's say for our listeners outside the industry, if you're doing like Tim Hortons or a chain of restaurants, like the Keg, like they have their own wall paneling, their own wall coverings, their own ceiling tiles, their own, like certain products are very like, and so a lot of times they're owner supplied and the installers are going to have to install them. They're wondering how to price it. And so you run into a lot of that too, right? Where you're facilitating between supply and labor, and a lot of these materials are really high end. Like it's not just like it's $2 a square foot, right? It's 30, 100, 200, right? And sometimes there's minimal orders, and you don't need a few cubic yards, but you got to order 100, you know, and it's all going to be, so you got to allow that in your cost. And it takes a lot of communication to get these things done, and then logistic wise to have it ordered and on site at the right time for installation. And
It does. You never want any assumptions made. Let's put it that way. On any end, you know, you're like, just ask the question if you need to. Or there's, you know, sometimes we do miss things. Like we put a spec in, we're like, okay, well, we have to order a whole thing of this, and you know, what do we do? So we're troubleshooting. We're constantly, you know, looking for solutions where there might be challenges. And again, like communication's the biggest thing I think in our industry, especially when it comes to construction. It's like, I don't care, just call me if you have a question. Like, don't make an assumption, just ring me and let's talk about it.
And I'm always coming at things from like the mentality of someone on the construction end, or as a PM or an estimator or a contractor, just because that's part of my journey in the industry. And I remember thinking earlier, just before the episode, like a lot of times as soon as I hear interior design, I always think of the ID drawings that are included in the drawing set with the architectural floor plans or whatnot, and how when you're pricing, it's always better, or you feel less of a risk when you can see the ID drawings too. And some sets wouldn't have them, you know, when they should, or they weren't ready for that yet, or it wasn't quite done. They wouldn't release them with the tender. And that was kind of how I distinguished between interior design and architecture. Like there's definitely lots of overlap, but it's just way more detailed, and you can see different things that you can't on the architectural drawing. So that was like, some of our listeners would think that right away. Probably a lot of estimators or PMs. What about for the association? just a little bit on the vision for growth, kind of where things are headed, or even the profession here in the province. Any thoughts on the future and vision
Yeah.
and growth?
It's a great career in Nova Scotia. It has been for.
And people can be educated in that profession here in Nova Scotia in different ways, right? I mean, Dalhousie, SMU, do they have?
Not for interior
Unfortunately
design.
Not for interior
No,
design.
no.
Okay, so
So
where's
you
the
have to-
closest? What's the?
Well, there is a distance program.
Okay.
I think it's Yorkville, isn't it?
Yorkville, yeah.
So you can get an interior design degree that's CEDA accredited.
And what about like if
online.
someone took 2 years at an SCC for architectural? Would they be able?
Technology.
Wouldn't be able to count toward anything
It
in the
could.
future? It could, yeah.
The school will evaluate, and they may say, okay, some of your credits can go towards
Yeah.
something, but
Okay.
it's never going to be like it's going to replace an entire year or 2 years.
Yeah.
But they might pick some of your credits and say, okay,
Sure.
these align with.
Right.
There
they're
have
gonna
been a
count.
few members that graduated as technologists, worked in the field as a technologist, and decided they wanted this career path. So they did do the Yorkville University
Okay.
online program
Mhm.
and achieved it that way.
And I think I interrupted you there, Laura. You were saying how it's a great career path, and before we dove
Well, I
into the
think we've been
education.
very fortunate in Nova Scotia. It's a great profession, and we've been busy. The construction
Time
industry
is
has been
obviously good.
very busy. Yes.
And labor shortage is affecting your profession as it is everyone else's, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
It is, and I think one thing. I mean, it's someone who's here more recently. I mean, I was quite excited when I first got here that the industry
Mhm.
has so much room, which is very exciting. There's a lot of work to go around. There's a lot of amazing designers that are already here.
Yeah.
I think our biggest initiative, one of the things that we've talked about is how do we bring people back after they've studied? So we're
Mhm.
thinking about upcoming generations. I think that's
Right.
where there's a lot more emphasis and importance that we want to give, which is, yes, the reality is you do have to leave Nova Scotia and the East Coast to go get an interior design education.
But you can't do it online.
You can,
Mhm.
but if you don't, and a lot of students don't, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it is a
And
program
I would
that-
rather not. Right? Most
Exactly.
would rather not.
It's a long time to
Yeah.
be,
Not
so
the best way to learn either.
Exactly,
Yeah, anything.
exactly. And it is a program where, being in a classroom is,
Studio time
it's huge.
is a huge thing in the learning
Yeah.
process.
Yes,
I
while
would
you're
say.
doing your all-nighters and stuff.
It's going to help you when you're out in the workforce that you're
Exactly,
collaborating
yeah,
with other people
exactly.
hands-on.
Yeah. So one of the things we did do is, like, this year we launched our first scholarship program. And we opened it up to Nova Scotian students that were preparing to study in the interior design industry.
Okay.
And it was a scholarship towards their education. And now we're going to actually widen it to say, if you are a Nova Scotia student already studying in the interior design program, you can apply for this
Right.
scholarship. There's an essay and a write-up,
Mhm.
but I think it's making sure we're making those connections with these students early on enough, and having that relationship to say, like, we hope you come back. Like,
Yeah.
it's growing. Like, the city is growing. I mean, we all see it in our
Yeah.
different sectors. There's a lot happening here, and it's very exciting. And so I think bringing people back would be really nice.
Yeah, I feel bad not being a Nova Scotian myself, but I do feel like we have to give all of our talent away, and young students go to Toronto or someplace like that and get
Yeah.
big city experience. We want to be able to have something to entice them
To come back,
No, I think eventually a lot of people find their way back anyway, but to be able to have an incentive I think this scholarship program as well educates high school students, and at that level young university students, what an interior designer is and if that's a career path for them. Sometimes they don't even necessarily know what is entailed in that career
Mhm.
profession.
Or they might choose architecture just because they're not aware of
Exactly.
exactly what it means. Yeah.
And I think we have done internship programs here in town as well, where we invite high school students to local offices so that they can work with us for a day and understand what exactly it is that we do all day, and know that it's not just making nice little color boards and things like that. You know what I mean? We definitely want to show them the fun stuff too, but to get a better experience of what the profession is, leads them in a direction knowing that they're doing the right thing for what they want in the end, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. And we always get asked from different colleges and universities across Canada, are you willing to volunteer? Can you mentor? Generally, it's either third or fourth year students that are going into their thesis. You'll spend an entire year with these students, basically guiding them and assisting them in getting through their thesis. And that's just another great point of connection where you're building a relationship with a student. And,
we do have a student membership category in our association as well, which is a great way to introduce yourself to the members at large and kind of getting an idea of what the practice in Nova Scotia is like.
Yeah. Any final thoughts? Anything that we, I'm sure we could continue for quite some time, but I think we covered a lot of ground, and I know there's lots of, for me and our team here at Atlantic Construction Podcast and media that, lots of connections and colleagues and industry members that we know that are builders and contractors and involved with a lot of these interior spaces. And the interior designer is one of the, the top priority relationships that they have and speak highly of, and it's such an important one for them, along with the front facing the client too. So it's great to get some context with you fine ladies today, and thank you for joining us, and really enjoyed this conversation. Hope
Likewise, thanks
fun.
for having
Thank
us.
you.
yeah, it's been great. Cheers.
We'd like to thank our longtime sponsor, Cook Insurance. Cook is your trusted insurance broker in Atlantic Canada for 50 years. The Cook team opens up opportunities for contractors by proactively managing the requirements of their bond facility. They expand levels of support and negotiate preferred rate, all while prioritizing ease of doing business. A Navicord partner since 2020, Cook is one of the largest construction brokers in Canada and offers national strength with a local touch. Whatever your insurance needs are, Cook has you covered. The team at Atlantic Construction Podcast has been able to build a strong relationship with the folks at FCA Surety. FCA Surety is strongly invested in supporting the Atlantic construction marketplace and helping contractors to build their businesses. We highly recommend them.